Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It started the way so many ordinary evenings do. Rushed, cluttered with noise, and a bit colder than expected for spring. I was sitting on the edge of the bleachers, arms folded tight around myself, watching my son's soccer practice wrap up under the stadium lights. The field was still slightly damp from the rain that had passed earlier, and the scent of wet grass lingered in the air. My son David was 13 and already more coordinated than I'd ever been. He jogged off the field, laughing with his friends, sweat making his brown curls stick to his forehead. As always, Coach Tanner trailed behind the boys, clipboard tucked under one arm, calling out reminders for next week's match. I'd spoken to him a few times, brief and polite exchanges after practices or games. He was in his early 50s, I guessed, tall, with silver along his temples, and a deep, quiet voice that carried well on the field. There was a steadiness about him, a kind of calm I hadn't felt around many people lately. David ran up to me and hugged me quickly, already half out of his cleats. "Coach said he'll walk you home since you parked far, and it's getting dark," he said. Then, before I could reply, he was gone, off to the car with his friend's dad, as planned. I turned, confused. He said, "What?" Coach Tanner approached, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Hope you don't mind. Just figured it's not safe walking alone out here at this hour. The lot's pretty far off." I hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know," he said with a small smile. "But I want to." We started walking along the winding sidewalk that led out of the school grounds, lined by tall trees, still bare from winter. The breeze had picked up a little, just enough to tug at my coat. The quiet between us wasn't awkward, though. It felt thoughtful, like neither of us was rushing to fill the silence. "How long have you been coaching?" I asked, more to make conversation than anything. He glanced at me. "A little over 20 years. Started when my own kids were young. Just stuck with it. That's rare. Most people move on." He nodded. "I guess I found something steady in it. Something that made sense when other things didn't." His words hung there for a moment longer than necessary. I didn't pry. We passed the back of the school building, the path now lit only by sparse streetlights. Our shadows stretched long ahead of us, occasionally flickering in the wind. For a moment, I was aware of how close we were walking. Not touching, not brushing shoulders, but close enough that I could hear the sound of his jacket shifting as he walked, his breathing steady. "It's funny," I said softly, "how different the evenings feel now. When my husband was alive, he used to pick David up. I rarely even came to these practices." Coach Tanner didn't interrupt. He just listened. "It's been 3 years," I added, surprising myself with how easily the words came out tonight. "Cancer. It crept in and tore everything out of order. David was 10. I wasn't ready to be everything for him." "You don't have to be everything," he said quietly. "You just have to be there." There was something about the way he said it, like he'd said it before, maybe to someone else, maybe to himself. I looked at him more closely. "You sound like you know." He took a breath, eyes focused ahead. "My wife passed 5 years ago. Car accident. Our daughter was in college." I thought I had more time to say the things I never said. We slowed to a stop at the next turn, near the row of houses where mine sat 3 blocks down. There was a bench near the curb, worn and old. Without speaking, we both sat. For a while, we just listened to the sound of the wind moving through the branches, the occasional car in the distance, a dog barking somewhere far off. "I didn't know," I finally said. "About your wife." He nodded. I don't talk about it much. People are kind, but they'd look at you differently when they know. I knew what he meant. I'd seen the same glances, the same polite pauses, the questions people avoided asking. David likes you, I said. He says you make him feel confident. That matters. That means a lot. He's a good kid. The quiet returned, but this time it felt weightier, like we were both dancing around something we hadn't named yet. I wasn't sure what drew me to ask, but I did. Do you ever miss being needed? He turned to me, a strange expression on his face, not quite a smile. Every day. But I've learned that sometimes just being around someone who understands is enough. My chest ached at the gentleness in his voice. We stood again and continued walking. When we reached my house, I turned to him on the porch. Thank you, I said, for walking me, for talking. He gave a small nod. Anytime. As he turned to leave, he paused. Then he looked over his shoulder and said, I didn't tell you everything back there. Maybe next time. The porch light flickered above me as I watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the soft glow of the street lamps. I stood there for a long while, thinking about the way he said it. Not as a burden or a confession, but as an invitation, one I hadn't realized I was waiting for. The next week came quickly. Soccer practice again. The same wind across the field, the same familiar sounds. But this time, when David ran off with his friends, I didn't look surprised to see Coach Tanner walking up beside me. I owe you a story, he said, smiling gently. We walked in comfortable silence again until we reached that same worn bench. I wasn't even sure if we'd agreed to meet there. It just happened. After my wife died, he began, I started volunteering more. Not just coaching, shelters, food drives, youth programs. I thought if I stayed busy, I wouldn't have to feel the quiet in my house. I nodded slowly. I understood that kind of silence, the one that echoed. But one night, he continued, I got home late. I hadn't eaten. The lights were off. And I realized I didn't want to go inside. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, just staring at the front door. His voice caught slightly. Not with tears. He wasn't crying, but with the kind of rawness that sits just under the surface. That night, he said, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Not family. A woman I knew before I got married. Didn't even think. I just needed to talk to someone who wouldn't see me as broken. I was quiet, waiting. We talked for a while. But it wasn't the conversation that mattered. It was that I reached out. It reminded me I was still alive, that I wasn't just this hollow version of the man I used to be. He looked at me then, really looked. That's what I saw in you last week. Not someone broken. Someone still standing, still showing up. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just sat there, letting the truth settle between us. When he walked me home again that night, he didn't turn away at the porch. Would you like to come in for coffee? I asked, voice quiet. He didn't hesitate. Yes. The warmth of the house greeted us, along with the familiar clutter of a lived-in home. I poured 2 mugs, the scent of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. We sat across from each other at the small table, the one I used to share with my husband. But this moment wasn't about replacing anyone. It wasn't even about starting over. It was about 2 people who had lived through loss, who had spent years avoiding their own hearts, finally letting them speak. The coffee sat between us, steam curling gently in the stillness of the room. Coach Tanner, Paul, as I now let myself think of him, wrapped both hands around his mug, not drinking yet. His eyes scanned the room like he was soaking it in, not as a guest, but as someone being slowly invited into a space I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. There was something grounding in the silence. Not awkward, not tense, just present. He seemed comfortable letting the quiet speak for a while, and that felt rare. Most people rushed to fill silences, but not Paul. I finally sipped my coffee and gave a soft smile. I should warn you, I'm not known for my brewing skills. My husband used to make the coffee. Strong, the way he liked it. I never quite got the hang of it. He took a sip, then grinned. It's perfect. We both chuckled quietly, and the sound felt good, real. The kind of laughter that doesn't try too hard, that sneaks up gently. Paul looked down at the table for a second, tracing the edge of his mug with a thumb. It's been a while since I sat like this with someone. No distractions, just ear. I know what you mean, I said, my voice soft. I used to be surrounded by people, friends, family, neighbors dropping by. But after everything, it's like the world got quieter. I felt that too, he said. Grief has a way of changing the volume of your life. There was a pause, and then he asked something that caught me off guard. Do you ever feel guilty for having moments like this? Happy moments? I blinked, the question landing deep. All the time. Like if I'm happy, it means I've forgotten him. Or I've moved on too fast. Or worse, that I wanted to. He nodded slowly. I used to talk to my wife out loud when I got home from work, just to keep the sound of her name in the house. I thought that was how I honored her. But sometimes honoring someone is also about letting yourself live again. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out. Paul, I said, I don't know what this is between us, but it's comforting, and that's not something I expected. He reached across the table and touched my hand, just a brief, warm press of his fingers. It was enough. You don't have to define it, he said gently. Let it be what it is. We talked until well past midnight. Stories about our children, small confessions about what we missed the most, her perfume lingering on his coat, the sound of my husband's shoes on the porch. Each detail was like a shared thread, weaving something quiet and invisible between us. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He turned to me on the threshold, the porch light casting a soft halo around us. I'd like to see you again, he said. You will, I answered. The days that followed felt different. Not like some grand transformation, but like a layer of fog had lifted. I found myself humming in the kitchen. I lingered a little longer on the porch after getting the mail. Even David noticed. You're smiling more, he said one evening, looking up from his homework. Did something good happen? I ruffled his hair and kissed his cheek. Maybe it did. The following Saturday, I saw Paul again. Not just at practice, but on purpose. He invited me to the little cafe near the bookstore, the one I used to walk past without thinking. We sat near the window and watched the world go by, wrapped in conversation that ranged from light to deep in the blink of an eye. There was something incredibly disarming about him, his patience, his attentiveness. I didn't feel like I had to perform or prove anything. I could just be. We ended up walking after, just like the night he walked me home. The same kind of slow pace, where footsteps fell in rhythm and words came easily. As we passed a small park, he paused and looked at me. "You've helped me remember how to feel something again," he said. "Not just the ache of what I lost, but the warmth of what's still possible." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "That's how I feel too." There was a brief moment, his hand brushing mine, a pause in his step. And then he turned to face me fully, his eyes searching mine. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" I nodded, heart thudding. I spent years convincing myself that I was okay, that I didn't need anything more. But being around you, it's like my heart finally exhaled. The emotion in his voice pulled something deep from me. Without thinking, I reached up and touched his cheek. "I know. I feel it too. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't need to. What we shared in that moment was more intimate than anything physical. It was a recognition of grief, of healing, of something new beginning in the quietest, most unexpected way. As we said goodnight at my door, I didn't feel uncertain or scared. I felt ready. Spring slowly gave way to the lazy warmth of early summer, and with it came a subtle shift in the rhythm of my days. Mornings felt brighter, evenings longer, and in between, Paul. We didn't make grand plans, nothing that needed labels or expectations. Sometimes he'd stop by after practice, and we'd sit on the porch with iced tea, talking about everything and nothing. Other times, he'd send a simple text. "Thinking of you." It never felt intrusive. It felt steady, like him. One Saturday morning, Paul asked if I wanted to join him at a local charity event his team was volunteering at, a community cleanup along the Riverwalk. I said yes before really thinking about it, and as we drove together that morning, I realized I hadn't gone anywhere new with someone in years. The river path was lined with wildflowers and the chatter of local families. Teens in matching T-shirts handed out gloves and garbage bags, and Paul introduced me as a good friend to the other volunteers. The words warmed me more than the sun. We spent hours side by side, picking up debris and chatting with passers-by. I noticed how natural he was with people, especially kids. A boy who couldn't have been more than 8 accidentally spilled a bag of recyclables, and Paul crouched beside him, helping to gather the mess without a trace of irritation. "You're really good with children," I said when we paused for water. He gave a soft smile. "I miss when mine were little. There's a kind of honesty kids have that we lose as adults." I nodded, feeling the truth of that settle inside me. As we walked the trail again, he said, "I never asked you. What did you do before?" Everything changed. "I was a school librarian," I replied, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I left after my husband passed. Being around kids without him felt too hard. Do you miss it?" "Some days. The quiet, the order, the smell of books. But mostly I miss feeling useful." He stopped walking. "You are useful. You've helped David grow into himself. You've helped me. Remember what companionship feels like." I looked at him, startled by the sincerity in his voice. "You make things lighter," he added. "Like the weight of grief shifts a little when you're around." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned into his side gently, letting the warmth of his presence settle against my shoulder. We stood like that for a long moment, no movement, no words, just breath and breeze and understanding. That night, back at my house, David was at a sleepover, and the house was unusually still. Paul stayed for dinner, grilled vegetables, nothing fancy. But afterward, instead of leaving, he stayed seated in the living room. His hand brushed against mine, and this time neither of us moved away. "Tell me something no one knows about you," I said quietly. He hesitated, then chuckled under his breath. "All right. When I was young, I wanted to be a musician, a jazz pianist, actually. My eyebrows rose. Really? Really? I even played at a few capes in my 20s. Then life took me elsewhere. Do you still play? He nodded. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep. You'll have to show me one day, I said with a smile. He gave a little bow of the head, mock serious. Only if you promise not to laugh when I hit the wrong notes. I leaned closer. I think I'd love it either way. There was a quiet pause, and then, for the first time, he reached for my face, his hand tentative, fingertips resting lightly on my cheek. May I kiss you? The way he asked, so respectfully, so gently, made my breath hitch. I answered by closing the small space between us. The kiss was soft, unhurried, the kind that doesn't ask for more, only offers comfort and closeness. When we pulled apart, our foreheads rested together. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel something like this again, I whispered. Neither was I, you replied. Later, he didn't stay the night. He kissed my hand and said, "Let's take our time. I want this to be something we both grow into, not something we rush through." And that's exactly what we did. The next few weeks were filled with small things that mattered. He brought me a book he thought I'd enjoy. I baked him muffins, terribly, but he ate every one. We went for walks after practice, shared stories about our pasts, and gradually, our conversations started to include the word we. Still, I hadn't told David anything yet, not because I was hiding, but because I was waiting for the right moment, the right words. That moment came one Sunday afternoon as we folded laundry together. "Mom," David said, tossing a sock into the basket, "are you and Coach Tanner friends?" The question was so casual it caught me off guard. I looked at him carefully. "We are?" He nodded slowly, thoughtful. "He's nice. You seem happier when he's around." I smiled gently. "Would it be all right with you if we spent more time together? Not just as coach and parent." David grinned. "I was kind of hoping you would. He treats you like you're important." My heart swelled. "You're okay with it?" "Yeah," he said. "Dad would want you to be happy." I swallowed hard, blinked back tears, and reached to hug him. He held me tight, and I knew in my bones, that I was doing something right. That evening, I told Paul what David said. He looked moved, deeply so. "He's a good kid," Paul murmured. "He is," I said, "and you're a good man." The next time he kissed me, it wasn't gentle. It was real, like he was no longer holding back. Like we both understood this was no longer just a quiet friendship, no longer two grieving people keeping each other company. This was a beginning, a true one, and as summer deepened, so did everything between us. The days moved gently into August, and something about the light in the evenings seemed softer, more golden. I noticed how calm everything had become, how different life felt compared to just a few months ago. The routines were still the same, but there was peace now, a steadiness that I hadn't realized I missed. Paul was part of our lives in a way that felt natural, like he'd always been meant to arrive at this point in time. He came by after practice not just to talk about drills and game schedules, but to chat over tea or help David with a tricky school project. He laughed with us. He listened. He fit. I found myself opening up more, sharing little things I hadn't thought to say in years, like how I used to love gardening, or how I'd always wanted to visit Maine in the fall. Paul listened to those dreams like they mattered. He never rushed me or changed the subject. He simply sat beside me and made space for everything I shared. One Saturday afternoon, we took a short drive out to a local nature preserve. David had gone to a friend's house, and Paul suggested we spend the day outdoors. The trail was quiet, lined with trees and speckled sunlight. We walked slowly, stopping now and then to listen to birdsong or to admire the lake at the edge of the woods. At a small bench overlooking the water, we sat down and rested. Paul looked out at the stillness of the lake, then turned to me. "I've thought a lot about that first evening I walked you home," he said. "It was simple, but something changed that night. For me." I smiled at the memory. Me too. "I didn't expect to meet someone who understood loss the way I did," he said quietly. "But more than that, I didn't expect to feel hopeful again." I looked down at my hands, folded in my lap. Hope can be quiet, can't it? Sometimes you don't even know it's there until someone reminds you. He nodded slowly. "That's what you've done for me." I didn't need to respond. I could see in his eyes that this wasn't about big declarations. It was about gratitude, about rebuilding something out of kindness and patience. When we got back to the house that evening, David was sitting on the couch, his backpack tossed to the side. He looked up and smiled when we walked in. "Coach Tanner," he said, "we watched a movie today where the mom remarried. And my friend said it was weird, but I didn't think so. I thought it was kind of nice." Paul glanced at me, a little surprised. "And why's that?" I asked, trying not to read too much into it. David shrugged. "Because everyone deserves to be happy, even after something sad. That doesn't mean you forget. It just means you keep going." His words stayed with me long after he went to bed. Later that week, as we sat on the front steps watching fireflies flicker across the lawn, I turned to Paul and said, "I'm not sure where this will lead. I just know it feels good to care again, to share life with someone again." "That's enough for me," he said, "one day at a time." And that's how we moved forward, one day at a time. There were no grand changes, no dramatic turning points, just the quiet unfolding of something genuine, a new kind of family, one shaped not by replacing what was lost, but by honoring it and choosing to grow around it. Paul never rushed us. He never pushed for more than what we were ready to give. And that, more than anything, made me feel safe, made me feel seen. By the end of the summer, I found myself waking up with more lightness, going to bed with more peace. Grief hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, made room for laughter again, for shared meals, for future plans. On the last day of summer break, David sat beside me on the porch swing and said, "Mom, I think we're doing okay." I smiled at him. I think we are too. And in that moment, with the porch light glowing behind us, and the gentle sound of crickets rising into the air, I realized something simple and profound. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that take their time, the ones that begin with a walk home in the dark, and end with the light finally shining through.